Mindful Coach podcast. Hello and welcome to the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill, and I want to talk a little bit today about the podcast itself. We've had like 34, 35 episodes now. They've been really great and fabulous interviews with people who are doing fabulous work in the world, really courageous, skillful coaches that are doing a lot. And, the intention behind those interviews is so that you can hear from people who are doing really, really powerful work in the world, really skillful, great coaches who are doing work with important segments of the world, populations who have, ADD, immigrants, people who have all different kinds of challenges, chronic illness, and the coaches who step up to help those folk. And very frequently, a lot of the coaches of that, there are thousands and thousands of really skillful coaches doing powerful work, but you never hear about them because they're not like the top 1% of all the coaches on the planet that are getting all of the, sometimes they say like take up all the oxygen and you get all the attention. And as a result of that, you just never hear about them. And so I've done a lot of interviews with a variety of people to bring those stories into the world so that you can hear them and get the sense after you've listened to these that, there's something going on out there. There are people who are there's a lot of people who are really good at what they're doing, making a difference. And in that way, if you take them as a whole, because even the few that I've interviewed is just a very, very, very small sampling of what's actually going on out there. And if you think about that for a moment as a whole, you think about, well, gee, I've only talked to like 34, and there must be 340,000 or 34,000, some factor of that, that's multiplied times all the people that they touch. That's a lot of goodness that's happening that is really invisible and really unheard of in this. And I don't mean unheard of like it never happens, but unheard of in the sense that you just don't hear about them because of the way social media works. You really only hear about the things that get all the attention. And this doesn't get the attention. And that's the main reason for so many of those interviews, which I love doing. And we are going to keep doing them. I'm talking about this because there's going to be a little bit of a shift in some of the ways we do these sessions, these episodes. I'm going to be talking some about things that are important, not just hearing from coaches, but hearing about the benefits and values of mindful coaching and the things that coaches who work in the same sort of expertise that I have and others have, why it matters and how it can be helpful to people in significant ways. And so consequently, it's not just to coaches about coaches, but to the general population about what it means to be a human being on the planet and these crazy times that we're in. And you know how crazy it is these days. There's so much going on, and you look out there and you go, wait, what? Now, what? How did we get here? There's that Talking Head song, Life. I forgot the name of it. Maybe it's Life After a Wartime After. But in the middle of it, it's like, how did I get here? This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. And letting the days go by. Water flowing underground because your time just passes and days go by. And then one day you look up and you go, wait, what? How did I get here? And often it may not even be a beautiful house or as he says, a beautiful wife, but what are the circumstances that I am in and how did these arrive? And if you just dial that back a little bit and go, what are the circumstances our culture in is? How did that arrive? It's a real head scratcher. If you've been around a little while like I have, if you've ever seen a picture of me, I've got some gray hair and I came about it honestly. It's because you see this sort of slow crawl towards where we are from where we were. And for those of us that have been around longer, that's been a little bit longer of a hike than for people who haven't. And I'm not trying to say that makes older perspective better or superior. In other words, it just simply is got more history to it. And that brings a certain kind of perspective that someone who doesn't have that point of view doesn't have. And like I say, that can be for better and it can be for worse as well. But one of the ways I think it's for better is that you have the opportunity, I have the opportunity in myself and others of my generation to kind of look back and go, oh, things are really, really different. And I'm old enough to kind of go way back to times to have seen the entire rise of the internet and social media, mobile phones, computing devices, the technology. And I was deeply involved in the development of some of that by having a long career in technology. A lot of people don't know that I was involved with that for decades. In fact, I started off as a technologist and doing training for how you implement and secure and administer servers, specifically Microsoft servers. And I developed an expertise in that over the years. And I was actually awarded an award that they give to professionals called the Most Valuable Professional, MVP, in a particular server technology called IIS, Internet Information Services. I was awarded as recognized as the most valuable professional for 9 years in that technology. And eventually they picked up the phone and they said, hey, Brett, do you want to go to work for us? And so I went to work for Microsoft and became their, this is a real thing. I became a technical evangelist. I don't think they use that term anymore, but it was fun and I really enjoyed it because I got to speak all over the world on technical stages. I call them technical stages where there are technical events. And let me tell you, there should be a reality show about these large events, because if you've ever been to one of these really, really big technical shows with 20,000 people at them, and they rent Disneyland or Disney World or Universal Studios for themselves for a whole evening, and other people who pay, $2,000 a ticket, that's like the evening out, one of the evenings out. These are big deal productions. Movie stars often show up and do keynote speeches. And one night, their Queen came and played specifically for the group. I mean, these are big deals. So I used to speak at conferences like that. And I say all that as kind of a tip of the hat to kind of the past that I've got in looking at where we are and going, like I said, how did we get here? And looking at the transition between all that technology and to the work that I do now as what I call myself a mindful somatic coach. I had a bunch of background also in meditation and some other techniques and skills that kind of dovetailed into the work that I was doing with technology. Believe it or not, there's a tremendous value in mindfulness in the enterprise. And when I say the word enterprise, I mean working for an organization that's got 10,000 or more people in it, let's say, which is a very different experience than working at one that's got 20 or 100. It's really hard to describe. If you haven't ever worked in a really, really large organization like that, it's a very unique experience that is different than any other kind of experience of its sort. And so you develop a appreciation for the kinds of things it takes to run a really large, complex organization that you just don't see from up close and personal unless you're doing that work in those. And they're all different, of course, but still the mechanics are very similar in the sense that, you've got teams and teams within teams and departments and cross-department functionality and different, silos sometimes they're called of functionality with marketing and engineering and research and development and legal and HR and management. I mean, many companies effectively have the same sort of circles of operation and the same kinds of challenges with communication, interaction, alignment. And there's lots of work happening around all of that to help organizations be more human these days. In fact, I was witnessing a conversation on LinkedIn recently where they're changing, some of them are changing from human resources to culture and people and culture is going to be the name, emerging new names for those departments. Now, I'm saying all of that to kind of take a step back and go, what are the kinds of skills that mindful coaches, which is the core topic of this podcast, know about and can help with to help people in a variety of contexts, including these work contexts, relational contexts, healthcare, all kinds of things. One of the things that I can do and often do is I talk about sort of the working on your inner world, your inner skill set. One phrase that I've been thinking about lately is like your inner leader, the voicing, giving voice to your inner leader. And a big part of that for me, like some of the big influences in my life, have come in a way that are a little bit, I should say, off the map. By what I'm talking about here is intuition. Now, that is a really fuzzy idea in a lot of ways because there isn't really a great quote unquote definition. You can go look up definitions if you want to, but it doesn't really help you get a handle on how intuition works, what it is, how it plays in your life, or doesn't, or is it even a quote unquote a thing? And I'm here to say that there are ways there is some mechanism which we don't understand fully about how people get information about our experience that is beyond the rational mind. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about woo-woo world of psychic phenomena, although we can go there, and I perfectly well could. But I am talking about more, there's an edge there. There's let's just look at it like layers. Like if you think of like whatever you think of psychic phenomena, whether you believe in it or not, like the sixth sense, the stuff that's way out there, that's on the edges of perception, and a lot of people don't even think they have a perception like that. Then what's the content of that? How does it work? If it's real, how does it work? What are the mechanics of it? There have to be laws and rules. I say laws like physics that applies, because if it exists, there are characteristics of it, and there's a means by which it works. So I believe that for these kinds of fuzzy senses, there's a way to kind of dial them in a little bit and begin to study the mechanics of them in such a way. Now, I left it kind of with the woo factor out there, but if you dial it back a little bit, and let's talk about our actual senses, our actual, known senses, the sight, touch, etc., the ones that everyone pretty much, most of the population has some of them. You have to kind of be careful how you say things these days, because clearly not everybody has all of them, but most of the population has some of these senses are working in some way or another. And the point here being that the way that your senses light up to give you information about what it is you're experiencing are not necessarily that well understood. And if you take a step back and go, what do I know based on my sensory information, you'll find that there's this world of, I'm going to call it impressions, or some more common phrase that people kind of have an easier time hearing are things like a hunch. I have a hunch about something. I don't know. And a hunch, most people don't blink at the idea of a hunch. I don't know why, but I have a feeling of, and that's the key thing. You don't know why. It's not a Sherlock Holmesian style derivative insight. Well, because you had, red mud on the side of your shoe and it matched the dirt on the side of your car, I know you were out in the mud yesterday, and, because it was only muddy 2 miles from here, I know you were at the pond, and what were you doing at the pond? classical sort of observational derivative deduction, but rather in the category, I don't know why I feel something is true. But still, you have a sense of it. Now, I am going to invite you and other people that I work with to sense into that sensation. What's it feel like? Somatically, and by that I mean in your body, and also I include in that your emotions. When you have a sense like that, it just feels like I'm not sure why. And I call it, there's a question mark above. There's like a question mark here, but there's also a sense of rightness. Yeah, there's a sense of possibility, of likelihood. And that it's irrational. And by that, I don't mean like stupid, but I mean, it doesn't come from an objective place. Now, how does that even work? There's a good book by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, which I am a big fan of that book because he talks about something that he gives voice to some experiences that are pretty common for me and for other people that are like sensory, somatic, intuitive, empathic types. Now, that's a whole lot of mellow there, but I want to layer over. Don't forget, I got this technical background, and so I'm very interested in the science of all this as well. But I mean, also, and there are a lot of people who are really, really, how should I say, alert in a sensitive way. And that means another way Google likes to say it in their Search Inside Yourself program, a high resolution awareness. So instead of looking at these hunches on an old, 600 by 400 screen, pixelated with, noise on it, going into 4K or 8K and going, oh, it feels like this. It's like this. It's like this. It's got this shape. It's got this sense. Getting a better sense of what these things feel like. Now, what does that do for you? Well, I'm going to go on record here and say that when you have that kind of a thing in your life and you have given it enough play to kind of tease it out so that it comes out of the mystery of, am I making this up, into there's something going on here and there's no question about that for you, life becomes really fun in a lot of ways because there's a lot of stuff that you can know about that you don't have good reason to know about. And I don't mean like you're walking around in this enlightened kind of insightful sort of depth insight into everything, but it's kind of fun to walk around with some insightful depth insight into some things. And when it shows up and in your world, it's really not only fun, but it's engaging and it gives a lot of texture and quality and richness to your experience of the moment that is just, I'm just going to say, delicious. And it's my wish for people that they have more of that in their world. So I'm going to talk about that in this podcast and how you can organize to help yourself have more of that in your world, if you're interested. So if you're not, you might as well just say goodbye right now. But if you are, then let me tell you a few of the things that have happened to me and how I came to understand that this is not just me making this up. It's a little bit of a long story, but I'm going to start with an awareness about the importance of paying attention on purpose. If you're familiar with the kind of the John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness, it's like paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the moment, non-judgmentally. And if you just single out that one piece, on purpose, that's so key. When I wrote a blog piece on this on my website on themindfulcoach.com. You can look up the blog post, How I Learned to See. When I was a young boy, basically like 14, back in the day, they had hard contact lenses. This is before soft throwaway contacts. And they have to make them almost like prescription glasses. You have to order them, and they were expensive, and you didn't throw them away. And I used to do a lot of swimming. And so you put swimming and contact lenses together and you've got a problem in general. Well, in this case, these were expensive contacts. And I went swimming and one blew out of my eye because I was in the water. And it makes sense, of course. But suddenly it's like, oh my God, I didn't even know I had them on, and the contact is gone. And I'm going, oh man, I'm in so much trouble. I lost this expensive contact, and it's in a big pool. It's a tiny little piece. How will I ever find a clear piece of, I don't know if it was plastic or whatever at the time, in a pool? And, it's a hot, bright summer day. So I was standing back and I was looking at the pool and I'm going, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do. So somehow I got the notion that I'm just going to go look. And so I was really good at holding my breath. I dove down into the water and I'm hanging out in the water. I'm noticing the dance of the lights on the sides of the pool is because, there'd been some activity. And so the waves at the surface of the pool were creating these little crests of light all moving through the pool, which to make matters even, more interesting, like how do you find something in this visually distracting sort of context? So I decided to do something unusual. I don't know where this came from in me, but I thought, what if I just use my eyes and I really, really look hard at about a square foot of the bottom of the pool? And so I did that for a little bit. I go, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that there's nothing in this square foot. And so I just kind of did a little mental calculation. I go, okay, so the pool's pretty big, but it's a finite number of feet. It's finite. And if I spent some time doing this, I could cover a pretty good amount of the pool. And so I sat there in this one space underwater, and we're going up and catching my breath every now and then. And I was actually feeling pretty calm, but I remember this sensation of really bringing energy, if you will, or focus into my experience of seeing. So I could see in a very clear way the bottom of the pool that I was looking at, the section of the pool I was looking at, and it was concrete and had little, sand ridges in it. Like if you ever looked at concrete, it's got sand in it. And so it was a little bit bumpy. And I began looking and I began studying very slowly and methodically the bottom of the pool. And then I kind of, after I did this for a little bit, it was like going nowhere and I'm getting disappointed. Came back down, looked around, looked up just a little bit, took in a little bit broader area, and I noticed a tiny piece of the bottom of the pool where the light seemed like it wasn't quite the same as everything else. Couldn't quite make anything out, but it just seemed like the light wasn't quite the same as it. Thought, well, that can't be right because this is water, right? And so maybe there's something. I'm swimming over there. Sure enough, there was my lens. I walked away from that experience with the very visceral, direct experience that you can see things if you try. If you really bring in an intentional focus, you can actually see things that most people would miss, and me, including me in this case, that I would miss. And of course, people aren't walking around dialed in like that all the time. That would be a little intense. But what happens if you can do it when you want to? Well, it turns out that's a pretty good skill to have, to be able to. And this day in my household, I'm the finder. Because I'm pretty good at finding things. But, it's not perfect, of course, but still, I do take time to actually bring my attention into a zone and really look. And I want to say that that skill has been exceptionally helpful to me, and especially helpful in coaching. When I'm dealing with a client, excuse me, I bring a lot of energy into my senses to experience the client in a very acutely focused way. Now, I want to caveat that by saying this is it's different. That experience of working with a client is different than like looking for the light at the bottom of a pool. Instead, it's more of open awareness, like a very acute focus on all the senses that I'm having in the moment of open awareness. And asking myself the question, what experience am I having now of this client? What's it like for me to be hearing them? And so I'm paying attention to their voice. Is it high? Is it low? Does it vary much? Do they have a lot of color or cadence or musicality in their voice? Is there a rhythm? Is it staccato? Is it slow? Do they slur their words? Do they stop? Do they stutter? All of those things tell me something about the person. What kinds of words do they use? Super critical. Then there's the appearance and their height, their weight, their apparent race, their apparent gender, the way that they dress, the way that they move or don't. Oftentimes the lack of movement is as informative as someone who is very aggressive with their gesticulations. So all of those things are contributing to my experience of a person. And my job, and the job of any mindful coach, is to simply be present with my experience of the other and be present with what that arises in you as a result of that. Oh, and I feel this way about it. Oh, and I have this sense about it. If you're really open and curious about this, and you have a kind of an open sense about someone where you're just really letting them impact you in a way where you're not making judgments. That's the last part of about the definition, non-judgmentally. I'm just experiencing somebody. That doesn't mean I don't have some, I would call them predispositions or thoughts around what might be going on with someone or what it's like to be them. It's not like you're a blank slate or these impressions are just floating through and then there's nothing left. But rather, I'm formulating a sense of how can I be helpful to this person where they are by what I call trying them on, learning in a very attentive way to sense into what it's like to be them. And if you can do that, one of the weird things that happens, well, weird, but one of the potentially fun things that happens is you begin to have hunches or intuitions about people. And some of these intuitions can be, they can go straight off into the woo land, but oftentimes as you do this enough, you get a good sense, not based on mystical knowledge, but based on the sum of your senses with some intelligence around what people are like and empathy and your own resourced database of my experience of lots of people. And of course, that has biases built into it, but hopefully you're attentive to that too. So in that way, in my experience, I get a read on people, what I call a read on people really quick. And it's not to say, oh, this is who you are and I know you instantly, but it is to say I have a sense of who you are pretty quick. And over the years, I've learned that that sense is not just imaginary, that actually often it goes pretty deep, pretty well. And that's something that is really, really great to have as an experience in my life and can be of big value to my clients. And I have to be cautious with that to be sure that, I keep the door open to being wrong and being open and curious and about it. That's really a key factor. So going back to the key point here about intuition, and I mentioned earlier the point about Malcolm Gladwell's book. I'll give you an example. He has a book. He has a character in that book who was someone who was what do they call him? Was an expert on art, and they would take art to this expert in order to have them determine if it was a fake or not. And so there's a story about they bring this painting to this, I believe it was a painting to this expert, And the expert looks at it and turns up because it's a fake. And they're like, wait, what? Don't you have to take samples and do x-rays and test the pigments and everything? And he's going, nope. And they're going, well, how do you know? And he goes, because I have a twitch in my left toe. Now, of course, that seems like nonsense. And if it hadn't been that this person was well known for being right, then it might seem like nonsense. But in fact, they were right. Now, how do they know? Well, this gets back to this non-objective sensory capacity we have. Something in their senses could tell that this was not right. And even though if you asked them objectively what that is, they couldn't tell you what it is. But their body knew that this is not right and sent them a signal, in this case, the form of a twinkling in their toe. And they go, oh, okay, this isn't right. So, and there are all kinds of ways. You ever walk into a place and go, something's off here. Something in the vibe isn't right. Or you're talking to somebody and you go, there's something off here. There's a sense. We have this sense of incongruity. We have this way of knowing without really technically knowing. And I'm inviting you to give some voice to that and give some expression to that in your life in ways that make it fun to explore. I'll give you some examples of how, like when I'm in coaching and I have an impression like that. Depending on who the client is, I may give that more play than not. But in this case, what I'll often do is I'll say, I wonder about, I'll just lead with the question, like, I wonder, or I get curious about. So the client might be telling me something about their work, and I get the feeling that, let's say, movement, I can see in the way that they express themselves, that they kind of enjoy the movement that they do, like with their hand. Maybe there's an embellishment or there's a little flair of some kind, but something in the way they move themselves tells me that they have a relationship to movement that is maybe a little special. And I don't know what it is, but I get curious. And so I might ask, do you have some relationship to like movement that's unique in some way? And that just comes from straight up observation, but also a hunch that there's meaning here. And very frequently they'll get, oh yeah, well, I was a dancer, or I am a dancer, or yeah, I'm a gymnast, or there'll be something in it that either validates my observation or not. Sometimes they aren't right. But the point is that frequently they are on point. And whenever you demonstrate that kind of insight into a client or a friend or a colleague or relationship, it generally is of something that helps build rapport, because what's going to happen? What if someone was to do that to you? Go, do you have some kind of a relationship with something? Or you were like a poet, or you a dancer? And you are, and they have no reason to know. What's that going to do to you? In fact, I had literally that happen. I was doing some physical therapy, and the physical therapist was talking to me, and I kind of noticed he had a interesting cadence to his words, and he used words in a little bit different way. And so I asked him, just out of the blue, because this was a good place for me to test intuition, because, hey, it's a, professional relationship and it's temporary and I don't have a big investment in it. So I just said, what's your relationship to poetry? And he literally dropped his clipboard and said, I'm a poet. I was writing poems like last night. That's what I do all the time. And so, score one for intuition. But that kind of a thing is actually fairly common in my life. And it's a ton of fun. And it can also be very informing to you in your world. It's not just, hey, playland, but also helpful to people to be able to connect in ways that you just can't otherwise. You can go a lot deeper, a lot faster by swimming in these depth waters that I have all the time, or a lot of the time. You get connected to a place it's kind of hard to describe. In Rumi has his poems like, I forget what the name of the poem is or how it goes, normal place. Well, I'm going to pause this for just a second and look that up. Just a second. Hey, so I found the poem. It's so beautiful. So let me read this to you. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and rightdoing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase, quote, each other, doesn't make any sense. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Wow. Wow. That's a poem is called The Great Wagon by Rumi. And what I'm advocating for is playing in the field, being out in that field more where we can be with each other in ways that are beyond words, beyond the rational mind. I told you about the example about the art dealer who knows, and I told you about the physical therapist where I have many stories like that. I was having a picture taken of me. I was going to be on, I remember I told you I was in IT world. At one time I was even on some magazine covers, and they sent a photographer out to do pictures of me. And this is more straight up woo-woo than otherwise. But I just want to give this an example because it's in there to do. And it's there for a lot of us. I was hanging out with this guy for a good hour and a half. And whenever I hang out with somebody for quite a while, my senses get really big. And I begin to have this experience of who is this other person? What are they about? And I listen to them and I bring that big antenna, if you will, all those sensors online. And I start to get impressions and so I start to get curious about them. And after about an hour, I began to feel within the vibe I was getting from this person that without good reason, without rational cause, to have the feeling that they had grown up near water. Again, I don't know why, but one of the lessons my teaching point here is people often get intuitional insights into their experience or into somebody or something, and they dismiss them because they are by nature irrational. They don't make any sense. And as a result of that, the cognitive brain, which is, thank God for that, goes, I'm sorry, that's nonsense. No reason to believe that. Don't be stupid. Well, yay for that. However, what if you can get information beyond what the rational brain knows about? And I know for a fact that you can. How do you ever learn to tell what you're just making up? Because that happens plenty of times. Eckhart Tolle has a saying, one of his quotes is, people say to always go with your gut, and comma, not always. It depends on where it comes from. Always trust your feelings. That's what he said. People say to always trust your feelings, and he says, not always. It depends on where they come from. But how do you learn? The only way to learn is to give voice to those things. So I said to this guy, I said, did you grow up near water? And he stopped and he looked at me and like, huh? Right. Which a perfectly legit response, like, wait, what? And it turned out he had grown up in Minnesota on a lake house by the cabin on the lake. And so he had many, many years growing up by the water. There was no way for me to know, but it was just a vibe. It was just a sense of curiosity. And I'm not so afraid of looking stupid that I couldn't give voice to it. And that's what you have to be willing to do. And so here's the invitation. The invitation is to Bring your senses online. Pay really close attention to what lights up for you in your awareness around people. Notice if something is particularly unusual or particularly irrational, and the other quality of this is unexpected. And if it's safe, I want to make that clear that you can't just walk around doing this everywhere, but in circumstances where it makes sense, what happens if you just ask about it? And you may find that you've got something going on that you didn't know about. And so I invite you to give voice to these unexpected, irrational hunches a little bit more than you do normally in order to just play around. We're just playing here. It's not like your identity is all wrapped up in this, in order to see if this is a real thing or not. Now, you may find that there are plenty of times where you're just off base, and that happens all the time. Things can be more refined depending on how still you can be. The more present you can be with your experience, the more likely it is that you have something come to you that it becomes actionable. This has a lot of value in a lot of different ways, and can even, I'll tell you a quick story, can even save your life. A dear friend of mine was once, this is a crazy story, but it's true, was once traveling with some colleagues, and they were in the Northeast and were invited to stay on a eco farm out in the Northeast with the guy who had run this system, which was off the grid, and they were interested in doing something like that. So they were in there, and they were having a good time, and they had dinner, and several of them felt a little ill after dinner, and they went back to bed, and she had this overwhelming feeling. She says, "I've got to get out. We have got to get out of here." There was no rational reason for it. They didn't, but everybody there, this person was pretty respected who was saying this. I said, "Okay," and they packed up and they left in the middle of the night and did not go back. They got a little ill, but they didn't know what was going on. But she felt like something was really off. Years later, and this is absolutely a true story, that person was found to be a mass murderer and with poisoning people in the place. They bring them in, they get poisoned and dead. So they were lucky they didn't actually get killed. But my friend was like sensitive in some way that something was off, and they bolted. Strictly straight up intuition and a sense about it. Now that's on the dark side, but there are plenty of bright side stuff too. There's like people that you feel like you know, people that you feel like can be allies for you. Checking out things that you wouldn't check out, choosing door 3, right? And it actually is the grand prize. There'll be all kinds of things like that can happen because you have developed the capacity to give voice to these unusual experiences and hunches, if you will, about other people. And that's the beautiful thing about them. It's not only can they protect you in some ways, but they can also connect you. And that's the key part, particularly for a coach or other people who are in helping professions, to be able to use these skills in ways to not show off and go, "Oh, look at this great, amazing intuitional capacity," but rather, I'm here to help. This is just part of the tool set that I have to be able to be of service to you. And that's what we need these days more than anything, right? We need people to be present, mindful, aware, connect with who we really are, give voice to that, and encourage us to be our best selves. And so that's what the Mindful Coach podcast is all about. It's going to be about this kind of information, insights, more interviews with other people, some amazing coaches, also some business people to help us be successful in our work. But I want to talk about also these skills and capacities and ways that we can be present in the world and have a really fabulous experience of life, moment to moment. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you have, and be sure to follow and like the podcast on iTunes. Leave a review, please. That really helps us a ton. They're so hard to get. And let me know as well. If you want to connect, you can find me at themindfulcoach.com. I'm happy to chat with any one of my listeners. And so there you go. Also, if you're a coach or a helping professional and you'd like to connect with your colleagues and meet a whole bunch of amazing folk, join us at themindfulcoachassociation.com. So this is Brett, and until next time, stay present. The Mindful Coach Podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.